Houston Sports Radio Live.
But TCU had been 0-8 in Big 12 play entering tonight. They knock off number 5 Kansas.
Today on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live.
No, this is the worst team that Kansas has ever put on the floor since Dr. Naismith, when he lost to Topeka YMCA and things like that.
NBA Commissioner David Stern says the group that has reached agreement to buy the Kings has formally filed to relocate the franchise from Sacramento to Seattle.
National Signing Day. Brett Bielema's first year as the head coach of the Razorbacks.
Been a little bit of a whirlwind, but we weathered the storm.
I actually heard from 2 different sources that his mother has confiscated the papers.
Here's the story involving Ryan Braun.
We obtained 3 documents from Tony Bosch's file at Biogenesis that included Ryan Braun's name.
The Dallas wins 105-99. Congratulations to Rick Carlisle, who earns his 500th career victory.
Walks away, shooting, scores! Jaromir Jagr wins it in overtime for the Dallas Stars.
On 99.3 Talk FM, it's Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live. Here's Bryan Houston.
Hey, welcome back. 4 o'clock hour. We are at Catfish King in Longview, and we will be here till 6 o'clock this evening. Thanks very much for joining us, and we appreciate Steve Lane and company for inviting us to come over and hang out with them this afternoon. Catfish King here in Longview, one of the original Catfish Kings, been around forever. Donna, the general manager, has worked here for 30 years. When you think of Catfish King, you think of catfish, shrimp, and chicken strips, but they also have the senior special. They also have lunch specials. They also have chicken fried steak, and you can also get catering done here, and it can be more than just catfish, seafood, chicken. They also can cater and fix up menus with steaks, burgers, Mexican food, barbecue, country cooking. Just give them a call at 903-720-5326. All right, we're going to go to the phone right now, the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete. APECGo.com, covering the Dallas Cowboys for RattleandHumSports.com. With us right now, our buddy Matthew Postins. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm good, except now I really want some Catfish King, man. I miss it.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's a staple. It's like a Dairy Queen's in East Texas, isn't it?
I haven't had some in quite some time. I get back to see my dad in Gilmer occasionally, but I don't get to make my way over there too often. I'm going to have to try to make a point to do that next time I'm in town.
Come on down. You come eat with me then. I'll even buy.
Oh, okay. Well, you put it like that.
Hey, I want to ask you, first of all, I saw something today where the Dallas Mavericks now say they're not going to shave until they get over 500. Imagine if the Cowboys made some kind of a statement like that about they wouldn't shave until the next playoff win.
Oh, dear Lord. You'd have a bunch of William Lee Goldens walking around Valley Ranch.
Somebody said they look like Tom Hanks on a deserted island, you know?
Absolutely. That probably isn't going to be that's probably not going to be a bet anytime soon in that organization.
Gosh, let's hope not. The other thing that I saw was really funny today had to do, of course, with the Cowboys taking it beyond deer antler spray. Tony Casillas and Nate Newton both talking about how they used to rub horse liniment on themselves to try to heal up fast, and they had this. It gave you this terrible breath, like onion breath. Which I find interesting because these guys all fancied themselves ladies' men back in those days, right, with the White House and all that?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So I have to imagine that would put a crimp in their style.
Man, if the lady of your life is named Trigger, I guess that works.
I guess so. It just goes to show you that players will do anything they can to get back on the football field.
Absolutely. I'm sitting there looking at potato salad, saying, wondering maybe if I rub this on, will that make my hair grow?
I don't think it will.
Okay, well, I just thought I'd ask. Well, anyway, all right, you have an article on Rattle and Hum this week. Does Jerry Jones get a bad rap for evaluating talent? And the first thing when I saw the title, I went, what? Are you kidding me? So what was your intent in writing this article?
Well, my intent was to examine, to me there are 4 periods of time now, and we have a huge sample size to go by when it comes to Jerry Jones. You have the times where he had a guy like Jimmy Johnson or Bill Parcells to lean on, and then you have these periods of time where he basically did it himself. He relied on a scout, He relied on the coaching staff, but basically at the end of the day, he's the one that made the decision on who to draft. I think we all say, Jerry's bad at evaluating talent. Jerry's bad at drafting players. And I think we just use it as a value statement because the team has been so average for so long. What I did was I just took a deep dive into their every draft from 1989 to 2009. That's a good 20-year sample size. And I just wanted to see if he was, first of all, I wanted to see how bad a drafter was he. And if he wasn't that bad a drafter, what is it that he's not doing that these other guys are doing that have made the teams more successful when he's leaning on a guy like a Jimmy Johnson or a Bill Parcells.
So what were your findings? In a summary, I would want everybody to go to the website and read the story in detail, but what basically did you see?
I saw the thing that really jumped out at me was that, if you look at the number of players drafted, and you look at how long they're with the team, and you look at the quality of the player, it's not necessarily that Jerry Jones can't identify players that stay with the team for 3 or 4 years. Where he has trouble is he has trouble identifying players that can stay with the team long term, talking 6+ years down the road, and he has trouble identifying players on a consistent basis that can that have the talent to secure all Pro berths and Pro Bowl berths. And I use that as kind of a litmus test because the Pro Bowl is probably the most recognized honor among fans, and All Pro is probably the most prestigious honor in the NFL. And basically what the article shows is that, there have been times in which Jerry Jones has been able to identify some good talent, but he does not do it nearly as consistently as the Cowboys did when Jimmy Johnson or Bill Parcells were in charge of those personnel decisions.
Which comes really as no surprise then, but it's great that you're able to do the homework and actually find proof that we aren't all losing our minds. He just doesn't do a good job with personnel.
Oh, he doesn't, and he's doing an especially bad job right now. Basically, since Parcells left the franchise, he's only drafted 3 Pro Bowl players, and one of them was a kicker.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's the fact that Johnson and Parcells were able to accumulate large amounts of talent in short periods of time that became above average or even elite players in the NFL. That's the part that Jerry Jones is missing. It takes Jerry Jones longer to accumulate that kind of talent than it did Jimmy Johnson or Bill Parcells. And another thing to note is this article doesn't even take into account the undrafted free agents that were identified during these time periods. With Bill Parcells, you also have to take into account that they identified Tony Romo and they identified Miles Austin during that time period.
Wow. And you mentioned one other thing. You were talking about the number of years that a player would stay with a team, and that the Parcells Johnson guys stayed with the team for a full year longer than the guys Jerry drafted. And that's not even taking into account how badly Jones hates to admit mistakes and how he would stay with guys probably a year or two. Felix Jones comes to mind. That's a guy that should have been gone 2 years ago.
Well, that's certainly a part of it, and I think another part of it is the salary cap, financial constraints. That's one thing that I could not take into account. I'm not a big-time mathematician. I can't create an algorithm that could take that into account, too. So I didn't take it into account. But I think everybody knows that in the late 90s, the Cowboys were up against the salary cap every year because by then Jerry Jones had committed large amounts of money to a handful of players, and players that the Cowboys might have kept longer than 4 years were gone because their contracts came up from their draft. Most draft picks usually get a 4-year contract. Their contract comes up. The Cowboys can't keep them. Therefore, they leave. It's a similar situation to what the Cowboys are experiencing right now. They have a lot of cap space wrapped up in a small group of players, and I think you're going to start to see players, who have been with the franchise 3-4 years. The Cowboys aren't going to be able to keep them even if they want to because they're not going to have the space to do it.
So another thing that we learn about Jerry Jones is he does not learn from his mistakes. He just keeps making the same dumb mistakes over and over again.
It would appear so. This is, I think we're in a Dave Campo level situation heading into this season. Simply because the Cowboys don't have the cap space to go out and get free agents. You have a general manager who needs more draft picks than Jimmy Johnson or Bill Parcells did to accumulate talent. And you have players that are coming up on their contract this year and next year that the Cowboys have to find a way to keep. For instance, Sean Lee. That's a guy that they're going to have to find a way to keep down the road. Well, the Cowboys have cap space to do it.
So really the only answer to this is something that Jerry just flat refuses to do, and that is just strip this thing down to nothing and rebuild.
Well, I don't know if you necessarily have to strip it down to nothing, but, most teams in this situation have a plan 2-3 years down the road on how to do it. You look at what the Indianapolis Colts did. I mean, they were 2-14 without Peyton Manning last year, and they did, to some degree, like you said, strip it down. They let go of a lot of veteran guys. They decided to go with a lot of young players. They kept guys like Reggie Wayne. They drafted Andrew Luck. They were very lucky in that regard because they got probably arguably the best quarterback in the draft 10 years down the road if you project that far. And, you can turn it around quick, but I don't know that Jerry has the ability or the acumen to be able to turn it around in 1 year like that. I think that if he tried to turn it around in 1 year like the Colts did, after they decided to get rid of Peyton Manning and Jeff Saturday and Dallas Clark, I think it potentially could blow up in his face.
Well, and the thing about it is the Colts were able to catch lightning in a bottle with Andrew Luck, which is kind of like getting Troy Aikman.
Certainly true, but they also did a very good job in that draft of finding guys that could, contribute immediately. Wide receiver T.Y. Hilton comes immediately to mind. Vic Ballard was a late-round pick in that draft, and he ended up becoming a contributor at running back late in the season. So they did a very good job, not just with their first-round pick, but just with their whole draft in finding guys that would be able to help them immediately.
Matthew Postins from Rattle and Hum Sports on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. I was reading an article today that Rick Gosselin wrote in the Dallas Morning News that backs up a lot of what you're saying because, as you well know, whoever wins the Super Bowl, that's who teams are going to be compared to. And They talked about the job that Ozzie Newsome had done since '96. When he was placed in the position of general manager when Art Modell moved the team from Cleveland to Baltimore. And they talked about the number of championship games, the number of playoff wins that they've had since '96, 14 playoff games. They played for 4 AFC championships, won 2 Super Bowls. In that same period of time, the Cowboys have won 2 playoff games.
Ozzie Newsome is one of the best in football, in my opinion, and those numbers certainly back that up. And the funny thing is, you barely hear from Ozzie Newsome. I mean, I think I make the point in the second part of this story that every other NFL team exists in the way you would expect an NFL team to exist. When I was covering the Buccaneers, we always dealt with John Gruden when it came to things like coaching changes and draft picks and things like that. We rarely, if ever, talked to Bruce Allen, the general manager. If we did, it was for a big deal reason, like a big deal player gets released or a big deal player gets drafted or signed in free agency. Otherwise, we didn't hear much from Bruce Allen. I dare say that Ozzie Newsome did more press last week in New Orleans than he did all of last year. And that's how the Super Bowl works. You talk to the GM quite a bit during that week, but Ozzie's a football guy. Ozzie plays. Ozzie's in the Hall of Fame. Ozzie knows what makes a good football player in the NFL, and he has a great scouting staff. And, unlike Jerry, he doesn't seem to care too much about having his ego stroked. He just likes rolling up his sleeves, evaluating personnel, making good draft picks, and that's why this team is good and competitive year in and year out, because there's a system in place in Baltimore that appreciates the whole process, from the GM and the head coach all the way down. And, numbers back it up. The Ravens have been one of the best teams in football for a long time, and Ozzie Newsome's a big reason why. And Ozzie's a guy who doesn't have a real big ego. He doesn't have to be out there in front of the cameras every day.
You mentioned a couple of things, too, that you have to keep in mind. With Ozzie Newsome, he has a specific kind of player that he always goes for. Yeah. It's kind of like with the Giants. The Giants are always going to go for big, fast defensive linemen, and they're always going to look for road graders for the offensive line, and they're going to build their teams around those kinds of players. And they talked about the fact that Newsome was big on building his team to run the football. He wanted bullies on defense, big, fast bullies on defense, and they've stayed with that plan ever since he took over in '96.
Absolutely. And you have a GM in Dallas who just decided to change his defensive philosophy for the second time in 8 years. So, that explains a lot about why the Ravens have won 2 Super Bowls and have been to so many playoffs in the past 15 years, and the Cowboys have won 2 playoff games. You have a GM in Dallas who will change things at the drop of a hat because he thinks maybe he'll catch lightning in a bottle and it'll work out for him. It's hard to know what Jerry Jones's philosophy really is, because I don't know that Jerry has ever really elicited that philosophy or even explained that philosophy to anyone.
I get the feeling that Jerry Jones' philosophy is I want to do anything that sells tickets. And so that's usually why you see him going for, star players or you see him going for backs and receivers and people like that. And that's why he ignores his offensive and defensive line so much in the drafts.
Well, Jerry certainly does like to sell tickets, but I think at the root of it is, Jerry didn't play in the NFL. Jerry didn't coach in the NFL. Jerry doesn't have an NFL background. Put aside what he says about being a football guy. He just doesn't have it. When you're a football guy, when you're in the NFL, when you've spent a number of years playing or coaching the game, you develop your philosophy. Jimmy Johnson had a philosophy, and he developed that over 15, 20 years as a college football coach, and that's why those Cowboys teams were so successful. Same thing with Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells has a philosophy, and like you talked about with Ozzie Newsome, he drafts and he develops to that philosophy. Jerry Jones just doesn't.
Don't you think, though, Matthew, how long have you been covering pro football?
I've been covering it for about 10 years off and on now.
Okay, and I've been watching it, and covering it for, 25 years or so. You would think after 17 years of being basically on his own to, and without handcuffs to pick whoever he wants to pick, you would think after 17 years he'd pick up some idea.
You would think, but he but if you read the story at Rattle and Hum, and it'll show you that he just doesn't have the ability to consistently draft the right talent to help this team be successful. And there's no real, there's no real rhyme or reason to the drafts either. In all honesty, you look at the draft, especially after Parcells. Here's all you need to know about Jerry Jones as a drafter. One year, he actually said, we drafted for special teams.
Yes, I remember that well.
You do not draft for special teams in the NFL, even if you're the New England Patriots and you've won 3 of your last 4 Super Bowls, and you're not drafting for special teams. You're drafting for the best players you can find, because you may have to have quality players like that if you have an injury or you lose a guy to a contract. For Jerry Jones to say that, I thought that was one of the most insulting things I've ever heard a general manager say to his fan base. We're drafting for special teams. No, I don't care how good you are. You draft the best possible players you can get, because you may very well need them down the line. And if that's Jerry's philosophy, that he's just going to draft for whatever he needs that particular year, then this team's going to have trouble consistently putting together talent on the field every year.
One of the other points that was made about Ozzie Newsome was that you're talking about a team, and then the Cowboys were in this position when they were really good. They were always drafting, really late in the first round. But the fact that Ozzie Newsome was always able to find great players, he said that, all of the guys who were, basically Hall of Fame type players for the Ravens, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, all these guys were taken, in the 20s in the draft. So these guys slid to the Ravens, and they always seem to find those guys.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that, because the second part of the story kind of delves into that a little bit, round by round. And once you get to that second day of the draft, your ability to identify talent that can help you immediately in third, fourth, fifth, sixth round is vital. And Jerry has proven over his time period without Jimmy Johnson and Bill Parcells that he's not very good at it. Now, Jimmy and Bill with the Cowboys, they weren't that great at it, but they did produce guys like Kenneth Gant and Leon Lett. Both of those guys were seventh-round picks. Brock Marion was a late-round pick. They found guys where Jerry isn't even finding any guys. The best late-round pick he's had since Bill Parcells left is Sean Lissamore. And Sean Lissamore's a nice player, but, he's not going to be a Pro Bowler anytime soon.
17 more years of this. I can see it coming.
Well, I think your only hope at this point is that either Jerry gets fed up or, God forbid, passes away and passes the team along to Steven, and Steven just doesn't want to deal with the headaches of being the football guy and hires a GM. That might be your only hope at this point.
Oh, my gosh. Let us pray. Anyway, hey, Matthew, thanks very much for coming on with us as always. We'll look forward to talking to you next week. And what else have we got to look forward to on Rattle and Hum Sports and all the other places you write?
Well, we're gearing up for the Combine, obviously. The All-Star games are done. It's kind of a bit of a lull right now. You're going to see a lot of players get released in the next few weeks. You're seeing it in New York right now. They're basically gutting their roster of any financial considerations. You'll see the Cowboys make some decisions on guys like Doug Free and Jay Ratliff as to whether they want to keep them or not for next year. But the big thing at the end of the month is the scouting combine. A kid from Chapel Hill, Matthew Tucker, got an invitation to the combine, so he'll be up there for a week. It's a great opportunity for him to improve his stock because right now he's projected to be an undrafted free agent. It's a great opportunity for him to sit down with teams and show himself to be a player that can be drafted in the 6th or 7th round. So that's the next big thing, and we'll be gearing up for that in the next couple of weeks.
Outstanding. Matthew, thanks again for coming on with us. We appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later on. Matthew Postins, Rattle and Hum Sports on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. We're live at Catfish King in Longview. Hope you'll come by and eat dinner with us, and we'll be back with more in just a moment.